Parshas Shekalim. The halacha brought down in Shulchan Aruch is that on Rosh Chodesh Adar Samach LaNisan, Rosh Chodesh Adar that is in proximity to Nisan, we read Parshas Kisisa, we read where the Torah describes about the Machzis HaShekel. It was at this time of the year when Klal Yisrael were obligated to bring in the Machzis HaShekel, the half shekel, which was used to purchase the behemoths for the Tamidim, for the Korbanos, for the Tamidim, the Korban Sibur, that everybody had a share in. They all partook in that. They had a share in the Tamidim that they were makriv in the morning and in the evening. And they started to be machriz. The hachroza for the Machzis HaShekel took place at this time of year. So we read Parshas Kisisa. Kisisa, as Reish B'nai Yisrael. When you want to count B'nai Yisrael, you don't count them with a head count. You count them, each one contributes a Machzis HaShekel. The question arises, normally when the Torah speaks about counting, it says Kisifkaid. It says a Pekida, Sifkaid. Why over here does the Torah say Kisisa, this unusual Lashon language of Kisisa? And why Davka a Machzis HaShekel? Why is it Davka specifically a half shekel? That they'd give a half shekel. And the halach is, the Torah says, Ha'asher lo yarbe, Vadal lo yamit. The wealthy person cannot give more, and the poor person cannot give less. It had to be uniform. And why is that? And there's a very interesting Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says that Klal Yisrael, they had the chet, they sinned by the egel. It was in the Machzis Hayom. It was at midday. That they rebelled and they sinned at the egel took place at noon. It took place in the middle of the day. So in order to be machaper for the chet of the egel, that took place in the Machzis Hayom, Klal Yisrael was commanded to bring a Machzis HaShekel. What does one have to do with the other? So the sin took place in the middle of the day, and that's why we bring a Machzis HaShekel. What's the connection? The Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh says that this commandment for the Machzis HaShekel, it took place after the Chet of the Egel. After the Chet of the Egel, Klal Yisrael was on a low level. They were yorud, they were demoted, and they were brought down from the lofty level that they were at prior. The Chet of the Egel, they were kaimam zokuf, they were bent over, so to speak, and they needed to be uplifted. They needed to be elevated, they needed to be raised, they needed to be brought up. So were they given this mitzvah to elevate them. This mitzvah elevated them, and that's why it's a lashon of kisisa, to rise up. This mitzvah of Machzis HaShekel, it had in it the ability to raise them up, kisisa. That's why over here the Torah says specifically lashon of kisisa and not pekida, not leisivka, not leisivka, because it was meant to not only enable the count of Bnei Yisrael, to count them, to know the head count, the census, but also to elevate them. So how does this happen? What's underlying? What's the underlying yesod over here with this Machzis HaShekel? The Alshich says is that we bring a Machzis HaShekel for the Korban Tamidim. We bring a Machzis HaShekel because we have to view ourselves as being all machzis. We're not complete. We're not self-sufficient. We're not independent. We're all only a part. We're part of the greater whole. And it's therefore very fitting that the Korban Tamid, which all Klal Yisrael took part in, that we acknowledge and recognize And it's clear that we are all just a component. And it's a korban tzibur. We're all together in it. We all join together. We all have a part in it. So therefore, ha'asher lo yarbe cannot increase. Adal lo yamed, it has to be equal. And it has to be all part, a machsis. Because in this korban tzibur, we all share together. So we are all only a machsis. And could be that is the reason as well, is that when we count B'nai Yisrael, the Torah says, Kisisas B'nai Yisrael, when we count B'nai Yisrael, it's with a machzis a shekel, because the counting, the very principle of counting, Zok Shem Shmuel, counting means you're highlighting somebody, you're identifying somebody, you're delineating him, and therefore you're taking him out of the whole. You're identifying him as a yachid. And that's where the ayin hara could occur. And that's where chas v'shalom the magefa could occur. So to bring this yachid back into the fold, into the tzibur, to be part as one, it gives a machzis a shekel. Yes, he's being counted, he's being identified and singled out as a yachid, but he's part of the tzibur. It's with a machzis a shekel. The machzis a shekel is to unify us. So we bring the machzis a shekel. It's mechaper for the chet of the egel, because it brings the achdus of Klal Yisrael within a scene of tzedakah all together. And it's through that means of the machzis a shekel that we all contribute to the korban tomid, the daily offering which we're all part of, and it's a machzis a shekel. And that's what's used for the kapara and to elevate us. But there is another yesod as well. Dr. Kotzker, we bring a machzis a shekel so that we understand, that we're cognizant of, and acknowledge that whatever our understanding of what takes place in the world, it's only a machzis. It's only a portion. It's only a part of the big picture. Whatever happens in this world, whatever events that occur in this world, we have to understand that we are only humans, and our understanding is limited. It's only a machzis. It's only part of the big picture. And that was the chet of Klal Yisrael by the egel, that they thought they understood. They made their calculations that Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to come down, and by noon, by midday, they saw he wasn't there. Ki vayishesh Moshe, that Moshe delayed. So right away they came to the conclusion that he's not coming down. And they came to the conclusion that they have to search for an alternative. They made that mistake. They were chayt in the machzis hayayim at midday, so therefore the Torah says to be mechaper for the chayt of the egel. You thought you knew everything. You thought you understood it completely. You don't. Your understanding is limited. It's only a machzis. Bring a machzis a shekel to be mechaper for the chet of the egel. Your chet is, you thought that you knew it all, that you understood completely, and look what the consequences were. Look what the tragedy that ensued. Our understanding is limiting. Bring a machzis a shekel to be mechaper for the avera of that gaiva of thinking that you understand it completely. Bring a machzis a shekel. Bring a machzis a shekel to acknowledge that our understanding is limited. And we're toila on the Rabbeinu Shalom. And we have to have the emunah and bitachon. And that's part of the kapara of the machzis a shekel. And that's why we're counted with the machzis a shekel. We bring the tmidim with the machzis a shekel. And in fact, the Medrash says that Haman gathered all these shkolim to destroy Klal Yisrael Rahman al-Itzlan. Rabbi Shalom said, yes, but my machzis hashekel preceded yours, and that's going to protect them from your evil plots. My machzis hashekel, kadma, is preceded your shkolim. And that protected it, and that was a protection for Klal Yisrael. And we read the Parashat of Shekalim close to this time of Adar, the time of Purim. And that's a lesson, a fundamental lesson that we all have to internalize, that we're part of a tzibur, and our understanding is only a machzis. And we have to be toila on the Rebbeinu Shalom with Amunah Bitochen and be part of the klal and part of the tzibur. One time, a very, very big Talmud Chacham came to Rav Elyashiv, and he told Rav Elyashiv, he said, based on my understanding, that such and such is going to occur, and this is what's going to happen, and this is what's going to be. Rav Elyashiv Zatzal said to him in amazement, so since when did you have and get Ruach HaKodesh? This may be your opinion, maybe what you feel, but you don't have Ruach HaKodesh. And therefore, it's possible. It's possible. But how can you say with certainty that this is when it's going to occur? And in fact, as a postscript to this Maisa, we know that even when we look and see all the Hashkafa and all the Siyata D'Shmaya and everything that was involved in the Nes Purim, and the fact that Esther was appointed and she became the queen, and we see now in retrospect all of that unbelievable Siyata D'Shmaya. But at the time, Mordechai said to Esther at the time, who knows if this is why you were appointed the queen, that you became the Malka? Who knows? Perhaps that this is the reason what it's all about. In retrospect, now we see and we read the Megillah, we see clearly that this was, but at the time, is perhaps that this is it. We always have to be aware that as humans, and even with the greatest understanding that we have, to maintain with certainty, it's only based on what we see in the Torah, what we find in the Torah, the Nevi'im and Chazal. This is what we can say with certainty, what our Chacham, in the way we are guided. And the rest is we use our intellect to the best of our ability, and we hope, mispalo, that we get the Siyata D'Shmaya,